Good morning, teacher. Thank you. Your country's almost to wash away anyway. This session is being taped, so I have to watch what I say. Good teaching is far-reaching, as our theme for this convention. Recreational Reinforcement is the title of our subject this morning, with a subheading of, Now They've Got It. What do we do with it? We are charged with giving a theoretical viewpoint. Being an old dumb country boy, I didn't know what theoretical meant. So I got out my trusty Webster dictionary. Theoretical is defined as relating to or having the character of theory. And I continued further. Character is defined as a conventionalized graphic device placed on an object as an indication of ownership, origin, or relationship. I did not originate any of these. They came directly from the dictionary. Graphic is defined as written, drawn, or engraved, marked by, or capable of clear and lively description or striking imaginative power. Device is defined as something devised or contrived as a scheme to deceive. Theory is defined as the analysis of a set of facts in their relation to one another and the general or abstract principles of a body of fact, a science, or an art. Fact is defined as a thing done, such as a crime. Relation is defined as the act of telling or recounting as an aspect or quality that can be predicated only of two or more things or parts taken together. Abstract is defined as disassociated from any specific instance and difficult to understand. Principle is defined as comprehensive assumption of a rule with habitual devotion to the facts of nature underlying the working of an artificial device. Therefore, we're trying to explain an ownership of striking imaginative power contrived as a scheme to deceive, a general art such as a crime, predicated of more parts that are difficult to understand with habitual devotion to this artificial device. A more fitting description of what we're trying to do is the definition of theory of games, which is the analysis of a situation involving conflicting interests in terms of gains and losses among opposing players. But to straighten us all out, we've got two extinguished gentlemen. Trying to be distinguished and doing a super job of it. First, I would like for you to welcome to the podium from Florida, Don Hanhurst.
Wow. What do you say but wow? We're going to try and get a little bit of semblance of what we're trying to get together today. Our subcommittee title, or our title is Recreational Reinforcement, as John said. Now they've got it, what do we do with it? And when I first received the instructions, and we first decided to discuss this, and how to discuss it, and what the way to do it was, we had to think about what the title was, what the subtitle was. And as I mentioned to John and to Jack both, I think that probably the operative words are they and we. The subtitle says, now that they've got it, What do we do with it? And of course, the overall heading is recreation. Recreation. My main thought is that if we do our job, then they enjoy it. That recreation, if we don't do our job, they just can't possibly have a good time. When dancing ceases to be a recreation for those we call for, it won't be any secret to anybody. Your dances will get smaller and smaller. People say recreation. What is recreation? Well, recreation, as far as I'm concerned, is many things to many people. To the challenge dancer, it's an intense feeling of satisfaction that they get from the correct movement done in complex figures put together by a master choreographer, and the mental chess involved is part of the recreation. Those of us who don't do challenge say, I never saw one of them dudes smile. There wasn't one of them smiled. But they are enjoying themselves. They are recreating. They're having a good time. They're getting away from their everyday experiences. They're doing it in this way, and there's nothing wrong with this. On the other side, there are the mainstream dancers who enjoy calls that they know very well, done to well-timed music, again, led by a caller who puts things together well and in time to the music and allows them to enjoy the music. There's also the beginning dancer. This beginning dancer comes to us and he says, I want to enjoy myself. That's why I'm here. So we have to show him that learning a very complex recreation can be an enjoyable task. If we cease to do that, we cease to have a class. If we cease to be master choreographers, we cease to have a challenge group. If we cease to put things well together in music, then we cease to have a mainstream or a plus group, and it's that simple. It really isn't that complex. You cease to have people to work with when you cease to entertain them, whatever your degree of entertainment might be. We speak, again, when we speak of recreation, let's not try and think of it only in terms of some happy, smiling person dancing. As long as someone's enjoying themselves at whatever the level, and as long as we are doing our job to entertain these people, then we are doing what we're paid to do, or what our job is meant to be. In your handout, we had this little recreational reinforcement. We took the word recreation, and we made a few observations on recreation and what it is. If you could pull it out, you could see what it is and go along with me. We're going to go over these things, and we'd just like to talk about them and give you some thought, something to think about over the next year. The first one is the R of recreation. It says recreation is the reason for square dancing. If you don't believe that, if you really don't believe that recreation is the reason for dancing, you should not be here. If you believe that the reason for square dancing is for your ego or your self-gratification, then you are in the wrong business. Recreation is the reason for square dancing. And it's the only reason people dance, regardless of what level they dance at. When they cease to have a good time, they cease to come to your dance. The E in recreation says evaluate every dance as it is occurring. Don't wait to be told that things aren't going well. Don't wait for the club to come to you and say, hey, Charlie, you really aren't doing the job. If you aren't doing the job, you ought to know it. You ought to know it long before the group ever comes to you and says, you're not doing the job. You can only do this by evaluating every dance as it goes along. As you leave a dance, think back over the dance. Was it what I wanted to be? Was it what it should have been? And did people go away receiving what they came to get? And that was 2.5, 3, or 4 hours of recreation. If they didn't, you didn't do your job. The C in recreation is concern for the feelings of all is paramount. If we don't have concern for every dancer on the floor, from the least to the best, then your dances are eventually going to fail. Because you have to have concern for the dancers. They are the reason we are there. Their happiness, their joy, is the only reason that we are behind the microphone. And without them, we can buy all the mics we want, but it's not going to do us any good because we got nobody to call for it. The next R in recreation says, remember that no one has to square dance. And some of us, I think, lose track of that. We think, oh, well, we got them. There are dancers, and they have to dance. That's wrong. There are 1,000 different ways that people can spend their money to be entertained. Square dancing is only one of those. And when you cease to entertain them, you cease to receive their money. And remember again, no one, absolutely no one, has to square dance to survive. The E is eagerly solicit comments. And I seriously mean this. I do, and I know many callers do, and I think it's a thing we ought to all do. Solicit comments from your dancers. Not did you like the way I put two figures together, but what did, in discussing, how do things normally feel to you? If someone comes to you with a complaint, listen. Listen, don't be turned off. Don't take the sour grapes approach that they couldn't hear or they couldn't dance because they can't dance, not because they couldn't hear. Possibly they couldn't hear. And many times that is the case. If someone says, gee, you're doing more than we can do in a dance, listen to them. They may be the small minority that can't pick up anything. But listen to them. Because somewhere between those people and the people who say, give us more and more and more, there is a medium that has to be met. And when you meet that, then you're going to have people at your dances. The A says attention to the mood of dance. Watch how your dance progresses. You should be able to tell by the second or third tip of an evening whether the mood of your dance is what it ought to be. If the mood of your dance, if the dancers are having a good time enjoying what they came to do, if you're calling a challenge dance, are they getting through the figures you want them to get through? If it's a mainstream dance, are they enjoying themselves, are they smiling, and are they moving in time to the music? If it's a beginner's class, are they learning what you're teaching them? If they're not, pay attention to the mood of the dance. If this mood begins to sour, you'd better change it. If you don't change it, you've lost them again. Thoughtless actions, the T. Thoughtless actions can ruin a dance. I don't know how many of us would like very much to be able to take back something said, something done at a dance that absolutely ruined the dance. I can think of many things in my own personal experience of times when I wish I had not said or had not done a particular thing at a dance. And sometimes pre-thought helps you avoid the tragedy of ruining a dance by the way we conduct ourselves. And remember, the dance goes good or goes bad only on the shoulders of the man who's behind the mic, man or lady who's behind the mic. You can blame no other for the mood of the dance, or if the dance is ruined, think about what you've said, what you've done, maybe inadvertently. Impatience with dancers is counterproductive. Again, if you have the tendency to shout, holler, shove, or physically move dancers because they have done something incorrect, again, question whether you really ought to be in the square dance calling profession. Remember again, these are not children we're dealing with. These are adults looking for recreation and happiness. They don't want to be hollered at. They don't want to point out and say, hey, dummy, what happened to you? Why didn't you do that? Not you, the other dummy. But, no, the other dummy. But truly, I have, in my listening to dancers, and I try to listen all the time to dancers, I find that I can improve myself. Learned a long time ago as a new caller that the best way to improve myself is listen to the dancers. I might not like what I hear, but listen to them. They speak the truth. Most times they speak the truth. And even when they don't speak the truth, they think they're speaking the truth. And so therefore you have to be able to evaluate this. But impatience with dancers in their ability to learn, with their ability to support us as callers. If a group of dancers elects not to support us at our dance, impatience with these dancers is counterproductive. You are never going to get them back by impatience. But by being patient and continuing doing your thing as you do it best, some will return. And if they don't, that again is part of the calling business. But impatience and shortness with dancers, to me, is a cardinal sin. And one that's cost us more dancers than we care to think. Again, in speaking to people who have dropped, many have dropped from levels from dancing because they have been browbeaten by a caller at a dance. Whether knowingly or not, it's been done. The O in recreation says, oppose the will of the vocal few. And again, any level we call it, whether it's beginner's class or C2 or C3, never having been there myself, but I'm sure there is the vocal few who say, we want, we want, we want. And the great minority who silently stand there and let you do your thing, and when you don't do it right, walk someplace else where it is being done right. So again, as leaders and as callers, we have to realize that if we oppose this vocal few, listen to them. Listen to what they say. But don't always decide that because they are vocal, they are correct. You have to evaluate. And the last thing under recreation is never, ever end a dance without saying thank you. I can't imagine ending an evening of dancing without before the last tip starts, of telling my dancers, every one of them who came, thank you for coming to our dance, because again, they did not have to come to my dance. They came because they wanted to, and so therefore I have the obligation to thank them. Or between the last words of a singing call, as the tag ends, tell them all again, thank you very much for coming, and if they do, they will be back. Thank you for listening, and I hope we've done some good.
Thank you very much, Don. Gee, I wish I could talk that fast. It'd probably take me an hour and a half to present all that he said. But anyway, what I'd like for you to do, and I meant to mention this earlier, if you have questions of our speakers, well, please make note of them as they're going through their talks, and we have floor mics, and we're certainly going to have time for question and answer session. Next gentleman on our program, and we all know him. We'd like to introduce him again, and he's more thrilled than we are that he's here. And I mean that very seriously. He knows he's glad to be here. Jack Lasry.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Recreational reinforcement. Where does it apply to where we are today? 1984, CALLERLAB. I can recall looking back through some square dance magazines from a little publisher and editor who was struggling with a magazine called Sets in Order about 25, 30 years ago, in which basically we were discussing very similar aspects at that period of square dancing as we are confronted with today. We were considering how do we make the transition for the class level dancer to move in to the club program without him becoming frustrated, overwhelmed, embarrassed by having some unfortunate experienced dancer who forgot what it was like to be a beginner, to turn his nose up at him and say, well, why don't you guys go back to class again? And why don't you learn how to square dance before you come to my club? The issue at hand is nothing new. Nothing has really changed with one exception. The complexity of the dance has further increased the size of the gap for the people who are learning how to square dance in our Learn to Dance programs to make the transition and fit into the club program. Now, how did this take place? Why did this occur? And what can we do about it? Those are really the key issues. And before we can find out what we're going to do about it, we need to first recognize that we do have a problem. And if we first recognize what the problem is, then the next step is to begin working together on trying to find some solutions. Now, we all know that a person who's a scientist and who receives a Nobel Award for creating a new drug that cures the world of a particular ailment that it has suffered with for many years is honored. And people think, boy, that's terrific. But people don't know that for every experiment, 99 and 9/10% of the hundreds of thousands of experiments that were tried failed before he hit upon the right solution. And that's an obvious picture that some of us don't see. So what I'm saying with that mention is that we need to start trying to find some solutions. I hope I have a few viewpoints for you today. In order to find out how we got here, let's look at ourselves. Let's look at square dancing, square dance calling. With the advent of the microphone, the square dance caller became understood and heard by the dancer. He no longer danced by the rote designation. We're now going to do Red River Valley, and you couldn't understand the caller because there was no microphone, and the band on the stage played so loud that nobody heard him anyway, and nobody needed to listen to him because they had danced the Red River Valley the same way since eternity. And with the advent of the microphone, the dancer had to start listening to the caller. And that was a dangerous tool because callers found out that they could change things around. They didn't do things the same traditional way that had been done in the previous 50, 60, 70, 100 years of dancing. So dancers began to have to listen because callers changed their routines around. And that opened the door to creative callers who said, hey, I got a new routine. Let's try this. Let's try that. And subsequently, what was a folk activity where all you had to play was the number 4 couple in the square and watch what the other 3 couples did when it was their turn. And then you could do the activity. We now have an encyclopedia with 4,000 created calls. And we have a mainstream program today of 68 plus family calls, which would have been a challenge dance 30 years ago. Okay? Now we're taking the same people that walk in the doors to say, I want to learn how to square dance because my friends say they're having fun. And we're trying to teach them an abundance of what they need to know before they reach the club level of square dancing in their area in about the same number of weeks that we were trying to do this program 20 years ago. And that little glass of water that right here is fairly full, we can only keep pouring so much more into it till it kind of spills over the side and is lost. And we only have one natural resource in square dancing, and that's people. And that's people. If we look at a class full of people as a stand of trees, and you're going into the forest, and you are going to eliminate some of those trees because we teach too fast, we teach too much, we get too serious, and we chop down a tree every time we lose somebody, pretty soon we don't have a forest. And what do? We move on to greener pastures, hoping someplace else we can start over again. But the people who grow trees have learned that there's an end to just going out and finding those greener pastures. That they had to reforest those areas where they chopped the trees down. They had to plant new trees so that 5 years or 10 years from now, they have trees to cut down at all. When we cut down a square dance tree, an individual, we do more than losing that individual to this year's class. I'm not worried about dropouts in square dancing. Now that may sound strange, but a dropout to me is a person who leaves the learn to dance activity or the activity in general because of a legitimate reason, change of work, illness, children, family problems, whatever the case might be. The people I'm concerned about are the people we push out of square dancing. And how do we push them out? Obviously, we push them out by trying to teach them too much, too soon, get too complicated too soon, before they really have an understanding of what the activity is all about. Now, we not only lose this person from this year's class, but if we truly have pushed them out, we have created a person in that community who, when his next door neighbor says, hey, John, my wife and I heard about a square dance class. We've never thought about doing that. He says, oh, man. He says, Mary and I did that last year. We tried it. And all they try to do is teach you 10 or 20 calls every night, and then they tell you got a diploma, and you know how to dance, and you go to a dance, and you can't do anything. All you do is get embarrassed. So this guy said, oh man, well, do I really want to get involved in that kind of an activity? So when we push somebody out, we are undermining our forest, which in many areas is limitless, the big communities, the giant cities. But for those of you in the smaller towns and the rural areas, you know that we have a limited amount of natural resource there. CALLERLAB is a wonderful organization. When we had our first CALLERLAB convention, we created a program called Mainstream. That was dynamite. Everybody recognized that we could go back home, could talk to our clubs, say, hey gang, if we drop this call and add these 2 or 3 calls, we can conform with an international program. We can all dance together. Beautiful. So our classes began to learn the Mainstream program, 68 calls. The following year, we said, hey gang, Mainstream's going good. But there are people who want to dance beyond Mainstream. Let's recognize that as a fact. And we created +1, 12 calls. People went back home to their club, said, hey, Mainstream Club, we've got a new plateau. It's called +1, Mainstream +1 at the time. Said, all we've got to learn is 12 calls, and we can raise the level of our dance, and we can be a plus club. 12 calls. Not an insurmountable amount. We learn 1 call a month. You know, in beginner's class, you learn 1, 2, or 3 a night. Gee, we could learn one a month and have no problems. So our Mainstream clubs became plus clubs in many areas, +1 clubs. What did that do to our Learn to Dance program? Said, hey guys, you want to join our club? You not only have to finish Mainstream, but now you have to know +1. And the same thing happened the following year. We added +2. A certain percentage of the clubs moved up that next notch. So we have created a problem. The callers have recognized the problem, but very often callers work for clubs. And the club president and officers say to you, our class Learn to Dance season is September until May. We have to graduate those people and move them into the club, and we want them to be able to dance with us. And that means 68 basics and 26 or 7 plus calls. And here we are with the problem 1984. I don't know why you call square dances. Why you call square dances is your own individual determination. Some of you call square dances because you love to dance and you felt standing behind that microphone and calling to all those people and making them joyously happy would just inflate your ego to no end. To see success on the dance floor, to see people enjoying themselves. And some of you say, wow, that guy over there had 40 squares at the dance, and tonight he made $350. If I could get to call pretty good, I might be able to make $200, $300, $400 a night calling square dances. And there are some people there who said, that's why I want to be a square dance caller. I want to be able to make that money. Now, somewhere in between all of this is where most of us fit. We enjoy the ideals and aspects of what square dancing has to offer to people, and we want to be a minister in that effect. We want to bring this out to the public. We want to show them the qualities of this really wonderful activity. And on the other hand, we want to make a little money too. We have to make enough money to pay the hall rent, to buy the expensive Hilton equipment, microphones, newsletters, whatever the case might be, the stuff is expensive, right? And here's a guy calling for $15 or $20 a night because he loves it, and he's got $3,500 invested in equipment, which he can never amortize. The love of the activity. Well, I don't know what side of the fence you fit on. But no matter which side of the fence you fit on, the importance of recreational reinforcement for dancer success must be important to you. If we do not provide a quality Learn to Dance program which provides for fun, fellowship, and recreational dancing, then you guys who are thinking only of money, every time you run one couple out the door, you're losing $3, $4, or $5 out of your pocket. And for you fellows who call because it's an ego trip to stand in front of a large crowd of people and have the power of the microphone to tell those people exactly what to do and relish in their success when something you've taught them or something you've called they get through, your ego must be diminished if your crowd tonight is only 1 or 2 squares instead of the 5, 10, or 15 squares that you normally have. So it behooves all of us to look at recreational reinforcement in our own light, and whether it's for money or whether it's for ego, it's for the recreation of that dancer that we must perform our duties in a little different manner in 1984 than we did in 1955. How do we provide recreational reinforcement for the Learn to Dance program? When people come into that door and they want to learn how to square dance because their next door neighbor dragged them there, sometimes physically. Oh, by the way, I may write a new call during this speech. You know the call very well. Ends run, centers run, girls run, boys run. Well, my stomach has been acting up this morning. And if you hear the call Jack run, I want somebody to open that door on the left and clear the path, because I'm going to be moving fast. John says, and then we'll all say, run, Jack, run. See Jack run, right? Reading reinforcement. We have had a couple of sessions on gathering information on how we can improve our Learn to Square Dance program. We are all confronted, whether it's me or you, with a limitation on our time. The length of time we have per evening, and the number of weeks that we have to teach, and the goals that we have for that particular class session or workshop session. When somebody learns to square dance and learns an individual figure, one by one, we kind of learn that figure mechanically, don't we? We learn that in the right and left through, the mechanics are we're going to extend right hands, we're going to walk by, we're going to put the left hand up, the girl will put her palm in her back, the man will put his right hand in her back, and we will perform the action we know as the courtesy turn. For the dancer learning the right and left through, this is not the kind of an action he normally would be doing in his normal day-to-day life, is it? Nobody walks around and says, let's do a right and left through. On the street, right? Let's have a two-lady street, you know. It's not the norm. So people aren't thinking about square dancing 24 hours a day like you and I are. They're thinking about it when they walk in the door. So here we're going to teach them tonight, and I grabbed right and left through out of the air. So we now mechanically must teach them how to do the right and left through. There are some callers who like to say that I can teach anybody anything strictly by explaining it to them over the microphone. And maybe you can. But some people who are far more intelligent than you and me have looked at how people learn. And they have found out that if somebody is sitting in a room and something is being explained to them, they probably catch about 20% and understand and can give back about 20%. If you add a visual aid, a drawing, a picture, a demonstration square, and then you add the verbalization on how the mechanics of the call works, they not only hear it, but they see it. And some people learn better or more easily by what they see how to do something. You know, you could read a book on how to build a car, but if there was a mechanic standing next to you and saying, now, this is where the carburetor goes, this is how it's put in, then you're seeing it happen. And thirdly, until you combine the listening and the seeing with the actual doing, only then have you completed the circle of learning. Now, how about the doing? It's important that when the doing is taking place, that we isolate the doing to the one individual call that you are by rote teaching your people how to perform mechanically. If it's the right and left through, how can we save time? Well, we can teach right and left through from lines so that every couple on the floor is active. Or we can teach the right and left through from the large concentric circle facing couples where everybody on the dance floor is at the same time walking through the mechanics of the right and left through. If we say, heads, we're going to teach you right and left through, and the sides stand around and watch, they can learn a little bit by watching, but 50% of your teaching time is gone. In that same 50% of time, you could have had everybody practicing and save your time. So what do? We say, well, the right and left through is this, that, and the other thing. We watch as everybody mechanically goes through it, and we do it slowly, and we do it consistently until everybody on the dance floor understands the mechanics of the right and left through on lesson first night of introducing the right and left through. Then we have to learn how to dance the right and left through. And at first, everything that we say to them has to go from here and travel all the way down to there, and the reaction time to performing is very erratic. Some people are going to do it more easily than others, some more naturally, some faster. So we emphasize the right and left through. Lines go forward and back, do a right and left through. Let's do it again. Go forward and back, do a right and left through on the same old track. Pass through, bend the line. Here's a new two, do a right and left through. So forth and so on. And as we call 5, 10, 15, or 20 right and left throughs with very little choreography in between this learning session, little by little, the dancer who takes a little bit longer and so forth, by sheer performance of doing it over and over and over again, begins to be a winner. Now, we only have so much time in an evening class. If we teach a call every tip, now we might do that on the first night of class, part of the way. You know, the first few weeks of class you teach 6, 7 calls sometimes in a night and there's nothing to it. Circle to the left, circle to the right, so forth and so on. But when we get down to the point where dancers are beginning to be saturated, 15 or 20 calls, then we need to reduce the number of calls they learn in any particular evening so they can really grasp them. So now we have worked with right and left through, and we have a background of several other calls, perhaps ladies' chains, perhaps 1, 2, 3 others. Then we say to the dancer, okay guys, we have learned how mechanically to respond to the term right and left through. We're performing that action quite well. Let's see now how we can fit the right and left through into choreography that we already know, other basics that we already know. And pretty soon it's the right and left through and the 2 ladies' chain. And so forth and so on. Now, recreational reinforcement means that we're going to provide an opportunity for that dancer to find success. Now, I've heard a lot this weekend, and you have over the number of years, about the importance of learning by definition. I believe that learning by definition is important, but I believe very strongly that there are times and places and degrees where the definition or the degree that you get into the definition should be placed into your Learn to Dance program. I am not a believer that in the first 6, 7, 8 weeks of a square dance class that we need to half sachet people and have girls play the parts of boys and so forth and so on. Because during the first 2 or 3 months of learning to square dance, we're still on very thin ice with those people. At the drop of a hat, 1 or 2 little things that upset them, they say, this is not for me, I'm going home. Because they haven't really got that little bug under their skin yet. We have to think like salespeople. And we have to provide the aspect of success. The Girl Scouts have a neat little saying, nothing succeeds like success. Now think about that. You're on the dance floor and the guy starts putting you into formations and positions that you are not ready for too soon. And you fail. And you fail too many weeks in a row. How long is it going to take you to say, I don't want to go back and be embarrassed again? And that's what we're being confronted with today. So, we now have a guy who knows how to do a few calls, and we've got 5 or 6 tips in the evening. I like to think that the first get-together of the class, after we've been moving along a little bit, is to call things that they should know very, very well, and very, very comfortably, with no attempt at all to get them to remember or learn or to tax their minds at all. I want to get them in the mood. I want to get them having fun. I want to get them having success at 8 o'clock in the evening, not failure at 8 o'clock in the evening. If we hit them in the head in that first tip, you've created a feeling of anxiety and a feeling that, well, maybe I'm uptight all the rest of the night. If you create a feeling of success in that first tip, of happiness, of enthusiasm, of winning, then you've set the tone for the rest of your evening. Now, when it comes down past that third or fourth tip, and you're going to save the last couple of tips for dancing practice and enjoyment. You know, the second tip of the night might be, let's review what we did last week. And third tip of the night might be time to introduce something new tonight, gang, in our Learn to Square Dance program. And then you've got to provide some time for what we're here today, recreational reinforcement. An opportunity to dance what they have learned and have success. The enthusiasm that you create on that dance floor, break away a little bit from the seriousness of the learning stage in your class, the time when everybody's sitting on pins and needles and putting their hands in the right place and their feet in the right place. Let them let their hair down. Encourage them to make noise, to hoop and to holler. Encourage them to learn how to play at having fun learning to square dance. So often today, we are so short a time and so cramped that the Learn to Dance program every evening is crammed full of learning and no opportunity to play games and to enjoy. I am sure that when you teach particular calls, you recognize very often there are formations from which this call might be confusing to somebody. If you anticipate that, for example, if you have the dancers for the first time in an 8-chain through position, and you apply a call such as the right and left through, which you've been doing for 4 or 5 weeks, and you don't anticipate that one of the outside couples is going to pull straight by, walk into the center and courtesy turn an oncoming dancer rather than the couple or the partner person beside him, then you haven't been teaching square dance classes very long, if you have never seen that happen. Now, if you have seen it happen this year, and you saw it happen last year, why not anticipate that it's going to happen tonight? Avoid that failure. Create success by taking 3 seconds and saying, hey gang, we're going to do something we already know. It's that right and left through again. Remember those little fundamentals. Right walk by, look your partner in the eye, man's left hand up. Doesn't take but 13 seconds to say all of that. And it just puts the reminder in that outside couple that, you know, I'm going to be courtesy turning my partner. You're dancing and calling for dancer success. When you are dancing for recreation, the last couple of tips, and you're beginning to combine calls, I've heard it said it's not a good idea to do things the same way over and over again. Now, I agree with that, but with some exceptions. I believe very strongly that when somebody is learning something new, that the basic patterns that you are establishing, for example, let me give you a little routine. You're going to teach them how to do a swing through, boy, run, wheel, and deal. You're getting to that kind of combination. And they've learned swing through, boy, run, wheel, and deal. And here you're getting to the dance portion. Call swing through, boys, run, wheel, and deal. Let them do it the way they were taught, the most simple way, and let them feel the success. Now, 5 minutes later, change it a little bit. And I mean a very little bit. Say, swing through, boys trade, and boys run, and wheel and deal. Now, I haven't changed a whole heck of a lot, but I've created the feeling that they have to start listening a little bit, that it truly isn't a memorized, rote combination of 3 calls together. But I've given them the opportunity to dance it just that rote way for success, and when they're doing it well, and they're accepting it, then I'm going to say, let's change it around a little bit, guys. Listen up. And I change it ever so little bit at a time. Change this one a little bit, change that one a little bit, change this one this way, that way. All of the possible combinations. You're in an ocean wave. Boys trade, girls trade. Swing through. Girls trade, boys run. All of the millions of things that they can learn to listen to when they are ready. When they are ready. In conclusion, I would like to say to you that learning to square dance should be not only the most enjoyable experience that those dancers will ever have in square dancing, because they always remember the enjoyable Learn to Square Dance program is the highlight of all of their square dancing, whether they go to C7 or not, right? And it ought to be a most enjoyable time for you. An opportunity for you to enjoy seeing people move forward, to learn at a regular, steady pace, but find the time to allow them to play and enjoy and make noise. Do not be like this friend of mine who was out hunting with another friend of his. And his buddy said, I got terrible cramps. I've got to go off in the woods and Mother Nature's calling. So he goes off in the woods and he finds a pile of stones and he's about to lower his britches and sit there. And about the time he sits down, a snake jumps out from behind those rocks and bites him right on his butt. And he calls to his friend and says, I've been bit by a snake. Where? I don't know, I can't. What are you going to do? He says, I don't know anything about snake bites. He says, well, you better go in town and get the doctor because I don't want to die. So this guy trudges off into town, gets into town about the time the sirens are blowing, the whistles are blowing. One doctor in a little town. He said, I got a buddy out there who got bit by a snake. He says, look, friend, that's no problem at all. He says, I got a busload of school kids that just got hit by a train. And we are overwhelmed. He says, here's what you do. You get a razor blade, you go back and you find that spot where that snake bit your buddy right on his butt, slice it open a little bit, put your mouth right on it, suck out the venom, spit it out. He says, he'll be fine. All the way back, he's trudging back to the woods. You think, I'm going to put my mouth on my buddy's backside? So finally he got there and his buddy's laying there. He's starting to swell up from the venom and he's hurt. He said, where's the doctor? The doctor ain't coming. Oh, what did he say? He says, the doctor says you is going to die. Now, let's don't get snake bit by the pressures that we feel today that so many of our clubs are forcing us to take people in September and in 25, 35 weeks make them plus level dancers. We can't do it. We cannot do it efficiently, effectively, with fun, with fellowship, or with success. Now, until we recognize that and determine that there's got to be some changes made, do the best you can to provide the recreational reinforcement that will provide for a happy, enthusiastic, noise-filled group of Learn to Square dancers. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. A lady got on the bus in town and walked back and got a seat about halfway back, and the guy across the aisle from her looked over and smiled, and it offended her. She got up and walked back about 3/4 of the way of the bus. The guy looked back at her and grinned real big. It irritated her. She went back to the back of the bus and sat on the very back row, and the guy looked around and burst out laughing. She was 7 months expecting a baby. She went up and told the bus driver. He pulled over and stopped and hailed a policeman. They hauled them all down to municipal court, and the judge asked this guy, why did you do this? He said, Judge, when she first sat down, she was under an advertisement on the bus that said, the Red Boot boys are coming to town. When she moved further back and sat down under a sign, it said, Sloan's liniment would have prevented the swelling. When she moved to the rear of the bus and sat under a sign, it said, Goodyear tire and rubber would have prevented that accident. He requested his case be dismissed. Yesterday in methods of communication, it was pointed out the importance of listening. What good does it do to hear all the things said at our conventions and never listen? Management schools teach that we must practice something new 21 times before it becomes automatic. CALLERLAB spent the first 5 years formulating many of the things that we're hearing today. These same things have been repeated for 5 more years. So we have 16 more years to go before any of them become automatic. We must be patient. I counted up 96 different variations of calls on the mainstream list that need to be done 21 times. I left out such calls as circle right and left and do-so-do and pass through and separate. You take the 96 figure, multiply it by 21, and we have 2,216 repetitions to call to a new dancer to become mainstream. With a 42-week class, that would be 52 3/4 calls per night. Try to do this program in 20 weeks, as many are trying to do, and we must do 110 3/4 calls per night. Try to teach both the mainstream and the plus, as Jack mentioned, in 42 weeks, and you've got 2,783 calls to do. And we'd have to do 66 1/4 calls per night. Try to teach mainstream and plus in 20 weeks, as some do, and you've got to call 139 calls per night. This is scary. No wonder new people don't want to join our activity. New people ask me how long it takes to learn to square dance, and I tell them 2 minutes. And everything else is just added to it. I never tell them it's going to take them 2 years. They never would show up. Anyone can learn to call to a group of new people for 2 hours and never teach anything by talking to them in language that they already know. On the other hand, what good does it do to spend many man-hours to develop a program of calls and then not use them all? What good does it do to spend many man-hours to develop a timing chart and styling hints and never use them? What good does it do to have a code of ethics and completely ignore it? What good does it do to have teaching and calling manuals published and then endorsed by CALLERLAB, and most of our members never purchase one? All of these things are tools of our trade. Learn your trade. What good does it do to teach a basic correctly and then watch our dancers dance it incorrectly, or the caller call it incorrectly? We teach a grand square to be 32 beats and then give the dancers 24 to do it in. Or we let them do it in 24 and never correct the problem. Or from a double pass through formation, we call square through 3/4 to a right and left through. Or from a static square, we call square through 4 to a star through. Or from a quarter tag, we call extend and star through. Learn your trade. Some of you may say, I don't have anybody in my area to learn from. Move. Or better still, find some place to go learn and spend the money to learn your trade. What good does it do to teach that a swing through is turn half with the right and those who can turn half with the left, and never show it from a left-handed wave as the sinners turn right first? What good does it do to teach recycle only one way and let the dancers dance it wrong by crossing hands and the ladies getting cranked around into position? Do we make sure that we teach the forming of a two-faced line in the center of the square on a Ferris wheel? Or do we teach it from only one dancer arrangement and let the men cut across on a diagonal and drag the lady backwards for 4 beats? Have you ever danced the lady's part? Try it sometime. These things are not the dancer's fault. We can only point the finger one way, and that's to ourselves. We don't give the dancers enough time to execute the calls properly. Also, how can a caller teach a basic if he or she does not know how to dance it correctly? What does it hurt to say, I was wrong, but I'm willing to learn and start today to do everything correct from now on? On the other hand, what good does it do to try to force too much material too soon on our new dancers and push them out of the activity forever? I'm afraid that we callers have not admitted that what we may be doing to our activity. Practically all over the country where I have been and others I've talked to, most classes have decreased in size. Mainstream clubs are few and far between. Callers who only call the plus program or beyond and don't teach new dancers do not realize yet what is happening. Only when those programs start decreasing will they realize that not too many new people are coming into the square dance world. Why? Existing dancers are not recruiting new people. We all know that's the best way to fill a class. Our experienced dancers are too busy learning more programs and don't have time to recruit, and it takes too long for their friends to learn to dance with them. This activity is supposed to be fun and a recreation, and not a close order military drill of more and more and more. I have a quotation in my office that says, if you are not the solution, you may be the problem. I'm going to stop at that point for a moment and ask if we have anyone who has any questions of any of our panelists. If you do, we would like for you to please come to one of the microphones in the center aisle, and we will be glad to do what we can with a question.
Lois Wolfson, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's not a question, but for any callers here who are afraid to go by CALLERLAB recommended teaching, I'm living proof it works. I come up from a city from about 3 million people. I am the only one, the only caller who 2 years ago had the guts to teach by CALLERLAB recommended teaching, and I do. A year ago last September, I started with 5 squares, graduated 8.5. But you have to talk to your dancers and let them know about CALLERLAB. Let them know if they hear of new dancers that are ahead of them. I tell my dancers, pity them, pity them. If you have a plus club, you have to have a mainstream club. You have to have 2 clubs. And if I were a Jack Lasry, I could get 6 other callers to help out on this other night, and it would be beautiful. But it works. Be gutsy. If you're thinking of the dancers CALLERLAB recommendation is that it works. I'm living proof.
Thank you, Lois.
John,
Please
Francis
give your
Zeller
name,
from,
where you're from. Sorry.
Francis Zeller from Kansas, and this is my 11th trip to CALLERLAB. I've been to every one of the conventions, and I would like to make the comment that I believe this is the best meeting and the best conducted meeting that I've ever been to.
You said it just like I asked you to. Thank you.
Yes. I feel that it's been very educational, and Jack, I want you to know that if you and me went hunting and you got snake bit, I would not let you die.
Yes, sir.
My name is Ray Duval. I'm from Hollis, New Hampshire.
You guys don't have to really get quite too close to the microphone. That's I know that we as callers, we like to eat this thing, but here in the hall, you don't have to.
That's the habit. This is my first time at CALLERLAB, and I've been calling for 19 years, and I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner. I have a gripe, and I listen to all this preaching and stuff about good teaching, and this is fantastic. This is what I've been looking for. What do you do when you are teaching a class? You spend 32 weeks teaching this class because that's all the time that you have. You bring them to a point where you think you've got them hooked, you think they're having fun. Then they go out to some well-known caller, and he starts calling coordinate, ping pong, circulates at a class-level dance. What do?
You asking me?
I'm asking somebody.
It's simple. It's very, very simple. Tell him before the dance starts what he's supposed to do, and if he does anything different, don't pay him.
That would be something that I would like to see happen, but when you have no control over it. In other words, like this well-known caller is supposed to be somebody that I admire, somebody that I thought could handle a dance properly. They advertise a class-level dance. All of a sudden you say, hey, you've got to go to this guy, gang, and you ship your class over there. Then he turns around and they start doing this. Of course, you're not there. You're busy working someplace else. You know.
Don?
Yeah. I think possibly, you're interpreting, you didn't hire this gentleman or this.
That's correct.
Okay. Very much the same situation happened to me. And the only thing you can do is, again, have enough confidence in yourself to know that you have done what you were asked to do. You have done it correctly, and therefore nothing more can be asked of you. A quick example happened to me recently. My dancers went out dancing with another caller. When they got to brand new dancers, only about 4 months in the class, 5 months in class. We have short terms down there because in Florida because of the snowbirds. Anyway, when they began to dance circle to a line, my dancers in the front there were told that he watched them and they did the circle to the line, arch and under. He stopped the dance and said, I don't know who taught you to dance, but I taught you incorrectly. Let me come down and show you how you're supposed to dance. So he proceeded to walk down the floor and show them slide to a line, or the scissors effect. They came back to me and said to me, now what is this madness? And realized these are 4 months dancers. I said to them, the first thing to do is you have the manual that I gave you that shows you how the figure should be done. Do you not? And they said, yes, I do. Read it, I said, and believe that's the way it should be done. I don't care what anybody tells us. That's the way it should be done. This is the way CALLERLAB and the Square Dance World requires it, requests it. They said, well, what do I do when I go to his dance? I said, when you go to his dance, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. But no, it is incorrect. You can't change the caller, but do it. The only thing you can do as a caller, I think truly, is know that you have done your job. When they come back to you, if you have done your job within your level, show them. Don't be afraid to show them. You have done your job, and the other guy isn't doing his job or whatever. But don't be afraid of what you've done. If you've done it correctly, you've done it.
I think what my question is that does CALLERLAB have something where, like if I was, like this fellow here did something wrong and I wanted to correct it, is there some way I can go to CALLERLAB and say, hey, Joe Blow just fouled up the mess and I'd like to have this straightened out. Is there something like this in CALLERLAB?
We have an ethics committee chaired by Jim Mayo that you can file a complaint with. Yes, sir.
Gee, I don't know Jim, but I'll be sure to make sure I do know
We
him.
do have that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, but before we have any more comments, please, I notice some of you in the back are getting some coffee back there, and the coffee break ain't now. And if everybody starts getting coffee, everybody's going to start going back there getting coffee, and this meeting ain't over with yet, so y'all just sit down. I don't mean to be facetious about it, but how many of you have been calling a dance and they put the refreshments out and everybody quit and go have refreshments? Comment.
Tom Selden, Maryland. In our area, the callers teach all different levels of classes, and we can't do anything about it no matter what we do. But we can do something when they get out of that class. And in our area, in our vicinity, we take about who's ever in our classes, whoever teaches classes, and we have a summer mainstream-only workshop. Now, some of these callers have taught their people plus or whatever. Who knows, in some cases. But 2 or 3 of us got together, and we have this summer mainstream workshop only. And we police it. We tell them, you come, you bring your dancers, but you call mainstream. Nothing else. You can workshop 1 quarterly a dance, but only 1, and you must workshop it. And we usually have 2 callers at a time. So they have to choose the main, and then we have to sit at the dance, one of us 3, and keep the guys from calling plus to make it work. But we do. And if any of them slips and calls a plus call, we go up and say, hey, you slipped up. And we do this, and it's been very successful. We have the hall capacity almost every night. You can't put any more dancers in about halfway through, so some will stop coming because they can't even dance anymore. But that's the kind of things that we need, programs like this, that even if in your area their dancers are being forced into plus, you still got to have some kind of program so that mainstream gets reinforced. You maybe can't make all the callers teach the mainstream long enough, but got to do something to keep the dancers, and I think this is one way you could do it. Thank you,
Tom. Everybody try to keep your comments as brief as you can because we've got a bunch of people lined up and we don't want to skip anybody if we can possibly help it. Yes, thank you. Please.
Sheldon Lawrence from Wichita, Kansas. I'm wanting to find out if there's anything being done with the Board of Directors on CALLERLAB in working through, like Legacy with their group, to channel down through the square dance clubs because, like you hit upon a point, we do work for the square dancers most of the time, and we cannot dictate most of the time what they want, and it is hard to do. It took a 5-year period to go from 15 weeks of lessons to 20 weeks of lessons in Wichita, and it was a struggle, and we still have problems because clubs are thirsty. They want to get their dancers out dancing as soon as possible.
To answer your question, yes, we do work with Legacy. We have liaisons between each of the 2 groups, and one of the Legacy representatives attended a meeting with the CALLERLAB Executive Committee last year, and so we try to work very closely with them.
I think this... Right. I feel this session could be recorded and sent to every Callers Association and every Square Dance Association and let those leaders listen to this.
This session is being recorded, so
right,
it's available.
But I say it would be good for people to buy it and take it back not only to the Callers Association.
Tell them about it. Buy a bunch of them and go home and sell them.
Okay.
In the back, please.
I'm Don Donath from Missouri, and we were talking about dropouts. If the dancers want plus AC, they can get it. What about the mainstream? This is the only recreation that I can think of that there is constant learning for people, some of the people in mainstream that do not want it. If you had 10 callers come in, whether they're professional avocation, whatever it is, in many cases you will have the dancers that dancing mainstream will have to learn 10. By the time the 10th one left, they've learned 10 different movements. Now, if you play golf, if you learn to bowl, you learn to play golf, you learn to fish, whatever it is, you practice that skill. But for many people in square dancing that do not want it, now the ones that want it can get it. They can move into the activities. But the ones that do not want it, in some cases, it's a constant learning situation for them at all times. How many people here can go to a mainstream dance and dance mainstream alone?
Are you asking for a show of hands?
Majority? Okay, yes. I'd like to know how many of them go to a mainstream. Now, I'm not talking about a plus star tip. I'm talking about a mainstream dance. How many go to a mainstream and dance mainstream only?
Quickly. Down. Okay, Doc.
But what I'm saying is this the only recreation where there's constant learning?
Gee, I really don't know.
No, what I'm saying, if you learn to bowl, you practice a skill. If you learn to play golf, you improve that skill. But in square dancing, some people, whether they like it or not, have to learn something new all the time.
You may be correct. Thank you. Wait a minute. Jack wants to say something.
You were talking about the everlasting learning situation and comparing it to bowling or golf or other forms that keep the same rules. We have golfers who go out once a month and don't worry about it. But we have golfers who go out every week and spend a certain amount of that practice time refining that stroke, going over and over and what have you, and the bowler with the hands and the release of the ball and so forth. So that is a learning and a practicing process. I know of no recreation that there isn't the opportunity for people to get better with their skills through a more devoted position to the activity. But I do agree with what you were saying in regard to the fact that once you get into square dancing, it seems like you're constantly learning to the point of until you finally die.
You're learning something new. Now, he's practicing, he's improving the skill in golfing. They're improving the skill in bowling. But in square dancing, they're learning new activities.
Point. I'd like to share with you something real quick and then turn it back to John. As most of you know, about 5 years ago now, I'm in my 6th year, my health failed a little bit and it became necessary for me to curtail to a 99% degree my opportunity to call score dancers away from home. So one of the first things we did at home was to go back and share our responsibility, which we had let go for a number of years, and that is of teaching people how to score dance, learning to dance. Now the first year back we had a very nice class, and we were doing like everybody else. We're going to teach the full 68 basics, and when we get through, we'll workshop a little bit, and we'll move on to plus, because that seemed to be what everybody was doing in the United States, and I figured, same thing. Well, I kind of got disturbed with what I was seeing. So I said, well, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm rusty, although I felt for a long time I was a pretty good caller, pretty good teacher. So I did the same program another year. 68 basics, the whole thing, workshop in the summer, plus workshop after graduation, the whole thing. By that second year, I was convinced that something was wrong and that it wasn't me. Third year, which is now in its 3rd year of program, I decided that I'm going to teach the CALLERLAB 48 basics in the first 30 weeks. And that's all. 48 basics. And we started in October, and we finished in May, April, and we danced 48 basics through the summer. May, June, July, and August. And in September, we started learning mainstream. The last 20 calls. And you know what I noticed? I noticed, more important than anything else, the people learning mainstream ate it up. They went through it like a hot knife through butter. They weren't confused with what's the difference between a swing through and a spin the top, because they weren't taught 3 or 4 weeks apart. They were not frustrated, and that's the answer.
Thank you, Jack. Our time is running short. I don't want to miss anybody, but please make it short, okay? Those who are at the mic will go ahead and recognize. Here in front.
Leslie Lone from Hawkeye, Iowa. Jack has just stated that he was in bad health. I don't know how many of you know it or not, but he is going into surgery very shortly. And even though he is going into surgery, he's here with us, helping us now. I'd like you all to take a moment and just say a prayer for Jack. We need men like him with us. So a short moment and a prayer for Jack. Will you please? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, in the back.
Dick Zimmer from beautiful downtown Burbank.
Who cares?
You're just like my girlfriend, John. You always get the last word. Yes, sir. I'd like to compliment the panel. This has been an outstanding presentation. And Jack already beat me to what I was going to ask. I don't know how many people have ever been to Sterling Hall, but Sterling Ranch.
Trails in.
On Sterling Road. Well, Jack will tell you the address. I'm trying to give you a plug, Jack. But you should go there one time and see his progressive program. I was going to ask him to explain his progressive program, but we're running out of time. You see his dancers on each level. Anytime I'm in Florida, I go there. And anybody that has time to stop Jack and ask him about his progressive program and how he moves new dancers through the advanced level and the challenger level, if that's their desire, could really learn from this man. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, panel.
Let's hurry.
Tom Drainer, Sun City, West Arizona. I think one of the biggest things that we have to consider in using this as a recreation is discipline. The dancers are not disciplined to do what they should do. As a result, they become sloppy dancers. The callers do not discipline themselves to teach properly, and they create those dancers. It's our fault. It's not the dancers, but it's our fault.
Thank you. Next.
Stu Shacklet from Brandenburg, Kentucky. For the gentleman who asked earlier, what do you do when your dancers go out to a dance and they get clobbered with relay the deuce or low the boat or whatever? I'll just tell you what I do with my new dancers. In our area, we have what we call halfway dances. And about halfway through lessons, they start having these dances for the people to get out and sort of spread their wings a little. And before they go to a halfway dance, I tell my dancers, I've given them a glossary of terms, and I tell them, at this halfway dance, you should not go above this point on the list. If that caller calls anything above this point, you go up and tell him he's calling more than he should, and then you come back and tell me, and you let him know that you're my dancer. And by this pressure being put on by the dancers to the caller, it has a sort of an effect. It's sort of a watchdog type of thing.
We got to hurry. I thought that was going to be the last one, but
just
quickly.
A brief comment. I'd like to say I'm Jim Sudborough from Portland, Oregon. What you fellows have said here just this morning has made this trip worthwhile.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No applause. No, quit that.
Tom Potts from Massachusetts. We've done a wonderful job of convincing our callers what we should be doing. I think we have to have some method of getting our publications to carry through what's been said today and get it to the dancer, because the dancer is the one who's really controlling how long our classes are running, whether we like to think we're doing it or not.
Thank you. Now, just sit still. I ain't done. And I'm going to do this. We've got to put the humanization aspect back into our activity, into this world, into this nation. I'm worried about it. And I'm afraid that we've created a monster, and I helped do it. The excitement is decreasing. I have faith in our membership and in our organization that we will find a solution. It's going to take time, but good teaching is far-reaching, and we can accomplish most of this through the chain of command of our organization. The chairman of the board leaps tall buildings with a single bound, is more powerful than a locomotive, is faster than a speeding bullet, walks on water and gives policy to God. And I don't mean this to be sacrilegious, this is just funny. The vice chairman leaps short buildings with a single bound, is more powerful than a switch engine, is just as fast as a speeding bullet, walks on water if the sea is calm, and talks to God. The chairman of the challenge committee leaps short buildings with a running start and favorable winds, is almost as powerful as a switch engine, is faster than a speeding BB, walks on the water in the indoor swimming pool, talks with God if a special request chit is approved. The chairman of the advanced committee barely clears Quonset huts, loses a tug-of-war with a locomotive, can fire a speeding bullet, swims well, is occasionally addressed by God. The chairman of the plus committee makes high marks when trying to leap buildings, is run over by locomotives, can sometimes handle a gun without inflicting self-injury, dog paddles and talks to animals. The chairman of the mainstream committee runs into buildings, recognizes locomotives 2 out of 3 times, is not issued ammunition, can stay afloat if properly instructed in the use of a Mae West, talks to walls. The executive secretary falls over doorsteps when trying to enter buildings, says, "Look at the choo-choo," wets himself with a water pistol, plays in mud puddles and mumbles to himself. And here's the real one, the member. You, us, I, lifts buildings and walks under them, kicks locomotives out of the track, catches speeding bullets in his teeth and eats them, freezes water with a single glance, because he is God. Thank you.